Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Just going to wait for it to tick to exactly 6 o'clock. And there we go. Good evening, everybody, and lovely for you to join us. We're very, very grateful indeed. Welcome to this special online event with Francesca Trotman, which I'm delighted to say we are joined by hundreds of guests. And when I say hundreds of guests, I do actually mean hundreds of guests. We're not just talking hundreds as in just over 100, so we're going into the 200s area. We've got 722 people enrolled for this session, so that's incredibly exciting, and we're very grateful you're spending your evening with us. Warm welcome to you all, alumni, supporters, students, staff and friends, everybody from the wider university community who've joined us for this evening's event. My name's Simon Kemp. I'm a Professor of Education for Sustainable Development at the University of Southampton, where I'm the University Lead for Education for Sustainable Development, and I'm one of the Deputy Directors of the Sustainability and Resilience Institute, where I specifically lead on postgraduate researchers, education for sustainable development and the Sustainable Development Goals. So sustainability is something which is really important to all of us at the University of Southampton. It's something that has been part of our DNA for an incredibly long time, even if sometimes people don't realise this. We do so much work across every element of social sustainability, cultural dimensions, political, economic, and particularly environmental sustainability, which is very much what we're here for this evening. We are an institution where we've got within our strategy, one of our main themes is environmental sustainability, to make sure that we embed it in everything that we do. We are very active in the wider community, and within the Sustainability and Resilience Institute, we make sure that we connect researchers. We connect researchers so they can get involved in as much interdisciplinary, high-impact research in the wider field of sustainability as possible. And everything that we do is encapsulated by our university triple helix approach. We make sure that all of this sustainability work is part of our curriculum, which is the main thing that I lead, making sure that all of our students have different opportunities to get involved in sustainability and learn about it within their courses. And I'm very grateful that a number of our students are joining us this evening as part of extra content around sustainability across all of our disciplines. It's an important part of our research, as I said, but it's also part of our knowledge exchange and about people, very much about staff, students, the wider community and the wider research environment. And that sustainability and marine conservation is our theme for tonight. And I'm sure you've heard quite enough from me, because what you're here for, obviously, is our amazing guest. So I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Francesca. Francesca Trotman is an absolute superstar, as you will find out when you watch her talk and when we go through the number of awards that she's won. So Francesca is the managing director and the founder of Love the Oceans. And coming back to the point about how that was founded will be a really important part of this talk. She is a marine scientist, and the charity Love the Oceans is a marine conservation charity working to establish a marine protected area through holistic approaches in Mozambique. Francesca is an avid diver, has been up for over 15 years and a passionate ocean advocate with a special interest in fisheries. It's very rare that you find somebody who is so not just passionate, but really authentic about what they're doing, really wanting to push themselves and make a difference, but not just make a difference in terms of the science, make a difference to communities and get the local communities involved as well. So she's very much results orientated. Francesca constantly encourages wider team members, but people across all of the communities to consider conservation in everyday life and to take a greener approach to modern living, something which is important to all of us. She oversees the majority of the programmes in the country and spends time split between the UK and Mozambique. And as part of that, a big part of Francesca's work is doing as much in the way of outreach to really make that difference, doing talks on behalf of Love the Oceans and all of their work around the globe. And most importantly, Francesca is the recipient of the Ocean Award in the Young Initiative category, which is incredibly impressive at such a young age, and also is part of that global impact. And we're especially proud, actually, really, really proud to be able to say that Francesca is one of our alumna. She graduated from the University of Southampton with a Master of Science, in Marine Biology, and recently received the Rising Star Alumni Award in recognition of her work with Love the Oceans. Francesca is currently completing her PhD remotely with Newcastle University, and we found out when we were chatting just now that she's also given a lot back to the University of Southampton in terms of co-supervising some of our undergraduate students. So again, giving back, a really much full circle type of work here. She's a member of the University of Leeds Biology Advisory Board, mentoring students through their BioMentor programme, and is a One Young World Ambassador. So that's 3 different universities. That's, that's quite greedy really, Francesca, but it's great that you're able to spread your time and be able to have that level of impact. So with this evening's talk, we're going to explore how Francesca's experiences of conservation take a very much holistic approach, highlighting how those environmental issues are really deeply interconnected with social challenges. And Francesca, I'd like to hand over to you now, please, to wow our audience. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along tonight. It's lovely to speak to you all, even if I can't see your wonderful faces. I am going to take you through a talk now about what I do and about the approach that we use at Love the Oceans. So as Simon hinted at in his introduction, I actually founded this while I was at University of Southampton. I was 21 and I was just finishing my master's in marine science, so down at Knock. We've grown a lot since then. So I'm going to talk you through how we've grown. I'll give you a bit of context in terms of what we do at the moment, and then I'll get into how it kind of all evolved and why it is the way it is. So our organisation is like a jigsaw, and each one of our projects is a piece of that jigsaw. And other people from around the world can take a piece of that jigsaw and put it into their own conservation strategy elsewhere in the world. So our vision is global, but our impact is local. We work in Mozambique. So envisage Mozambique as almost like a pilot project. And half of our work is research and the other half is outreach. Those two are equally as important. Obviously, as a marine scientist by training, I love the research element, but I've also really grown to love the outreach work that we do. So both are equally important because the research informs legislation change. So our midterm goal is to establish a marine protected area in Jangamo in Mozambique, which is where we're based. And that is needs to be informed by science. So the science element informs the legislation around that. So fisheries regulations, what should and shouldn't be happening in the area, all of that kind of information, understanding the ecological changes over a period of time, that kind of thing. And then so in terms of the research that we do, as Simon said, my special interest is fisheries. I've got fisheries data coming out my ears at the moment, but we do fisheries research, we do apex predator research, so that's the beta remote underwater videos, which is the middle image there. We do coral reef research. We actually have 4 different data sets with the coral reef work that we do. We do some turtle research, megafauna research, ocean trash research. I can talk forever on each of these topics. I'm not going to. I'm just giving you the highlight reel now. And then our outreach work. So the reason we do our outreach work is because the model, marine protected area model that we're using and conservation approach that we're using is a locally led one, which means you have to have a community with the skill sets to be able to manage a marine protected area successfully. And so we have a number of different outreach projects. We have our swimming project, we have our gender equity projects, we have our alternative livelihoods projects, we have our ocean literacy projects with kids and adults, and we have our sustainable fishing project as well. A lot of people think, wow, you do so much, and how are all of these things related? So I'm going to talk you through the evolution of how these projects came about. And this is also applicable. I'm going to use, obviously, Love the Oceans as a case study, but if you're looking to set your own thing up or looking to work in this sector, it's a really good way to envisage how to build a project and how to essentially do a root cause analysis. But I was 21 when I started Love the Oceans and I didn't know it was called that. So I'm going to talk you through what is holistic conservation and how it kind of came about. So just kind of by definition, holistic conservation is basically identifying a environmental issue and then approaching it from a number of different angles, which includes socioeconomic stuff as well, hence the outreach stuff that we do. But I'm going to talk you through the evolution of root cause analysis, but the evolution of how this approach kind of developed. For me, the way I always describe this is like, imagine you're a 5-year-old and you just repeatedly ask your mum why, and it's really annoying and she tells you to shut up usually, but this is essentially the adult version of that. So you just continuously ask why. So for example, the marine ecosystem is not healthy. That's the scientific evidence, that's the fact that we're dealing with. Why? Well, people are fishing any way they can to feed their families and make money. Well, why is that? Well, they're unaware of declining fishing stocks. Okay, well, why are they unaware of the declining fishing stocks? Well, there's a lack of data. So they don't have enough data to be able to understand what's happening to the fish stocks in the area, and obviously food security that's attached to that. Why is there a lack of data? Well, there's a lack of education. People don't have the education to be able to collect the data, to be able to understand and be aware of the declining fish stocks. Also, specifically in our area, as I said, I'm using Love the Oceans as an example, but specifically in our area, only fishermen use the ocean. So there's no kind of recreational swimmers that go in and use the ocean who can observe changes over time. The only people that are engaging with the ocean and are in the water, seeing it every day, are fishermen. So there's kind of lack of observational data as well. The lack of education and only fishermen using the ocean means that is because there is a fear of the ocean. So again, asking why that is, well, no one can swim. So if you imagine that you can't swim, everyone you know can't swim, and anytime someone you love goes into the ocean, they drown and they don't come back, you're not going to want to conserve the ocean. You're going to fear it. And generally studies show that fear of the ocean is not, it like counters marine conservation efforts. I think it was David Attenborough that said you protect what you know, basically. You can't protect what you don't know. So no one can swim. Another reason one of the reasons for that no one can swim is there's no qualified instructors in the area, which kind of goes back to the lack of education. And there's also no locally owned tourism outlets. So a lot of our lodges are all foreign owned and exist for tourism. So if tourism is in, then there's no kind of pool use to be able to learn to swim. We're on what's called the Wild Coast. So we have a type of ocean that is not flat like the Maldives, unfortunately, as much as I would love that. It's pretty wild. So when you look at the ocean, there's big waves, and it's not one that you can paddle around in and learn to swim in. You need to learn to swim in an enclosed space in a pool, which means you then need access to that pool. So why are there no locally owned tourism outlets? There's a lot of poverty in our area. To give you a bit of background, people leave school around the age of 14. Illiteracy rates are about 50%, 75% in women. And then when you kind of add more whys in, this links even further. So when I have our students on site in Mozambique, I sit for 3 hours and I build this on every project that we do and then link it together. So it becomes a really complex spider diagram. And this is just one example. So as you can see from this, it's complicated already, which is why I wanted to build it with you during this presentation. Because essentially what you do after this is you look at where your arrows are going in, but there's no arrows coming out. And those are your root causes. So that's where you can start to look at how you can address that initial issue. Then you can look as well elsewhere in the structure and see what other points you might be able to help on. So for us, my scientific background at the beginning, lack of data. Well, I mean, I still have a scientific background now, but back at the start, as a marine scientist, that was something I could help with, and no safe space to learn to swim. We could try and secure a grant, rent pool space, that kind of stuff. So that's when we started to develop our projects. So lack of data, fairly easily addressed through data collection. Obviously, trials and tribulations of failed data collection, goes without saying, but collecting data can fill that data gap and be able to, you can get that information to be able to understand, for example, in this context, declining fish stocks. and lack of education. We can supplement the national curriculum with resources, ocean literacy resources. So that's why we have our kids program, which is a 6-month syllabus, but we also have an adults program as well. That's we call it Ocean School. So we work at 2 local schools with that. Lack of safe spaces to learn to swim. So we rent a pool and last year we trained 700 kids to learn to swim, which I know that it might seem like swimming is a bit of a weird one for a marine science organisation, but it's actually a critical skill, because when you think about marine protected areas, you have to ecologically monitor a marine protected area to ensure that it's reaching its goals and the entire point of the marine protected area. But you can't monitor a marine protected area if you can't swim, because usually in a marine protected area, you're going to be in the water collecting that data. 95% of people in our community can't swim. So this is a major skill gap for inclusive marine governance and ocean governance. So this is probably one of our cornerstone community projects and is super important in the work that we do. And that leads through, if you think about the skill progression, and when you look at alternative livelihoods to unsustainable fishing practices and stuff, that leads through to skill progression into diving. So diving opens up a whole new world in terms of data collection and being able to ecologically monitor your marine protected area, but also in terms of alternative livelihoods, jobs within tourism, all of that kind of stuff. So this is Mario, who's one of our field assistants, and he's the first dive master, PADI dive master, which is your professional level of diving essentially in the district. So he got qualified. He joined actually through our internship program when he was 16, learned to swim, now is a qualified lifeguard and swimming instructor, and is a PADI dive master. And so he's currently learning underwater photography, which is a journey in itself, but he's a great example of skill progression and how important it is to be able to bridge that gap. And our sustainable fishing project as well, which is all about alternative livelihoods, so similar to the previous slide, but this is more about transition of fishermen away from unsustainable net use to more sustainable fishing methods. This was informed by our fisheries data and our coral data, and continues to be informed by it, but essentially not removing fish as a protein source, because you can't do that in a community that relies on fishing as a primary protein source. Food security is also already scarce. You can't just eliminate fishing, but you can transition fishermen towards more sustainable fishing. So that's our sustainable fishing project and alternative livelihoods there. And once you address those root causes, the rest of the issues that are joint to that fade away, and eventually you can solve your initial issue by addressing other problems. Just to use another example, when you are designing this strategy, you've also got to think about your stakeholder base. So in our area, 51% of our stakeholders are women. So when we do these meetings, as you can see, the majority of photos, this is one of our meetings, the majority of people in here are men. And when you're designing a strategy, to create an as effective strategy as possible and be able to make sure that you're predicting any kind of bumps in your road and any issues, barriers, working through them before you get to them, so you're not struck like and stopped in the middle of your project or whatever, you need as many inputs from different people that have lived different lives as possible. And different community members and stakeholder groups have different lived experiences. So for example, women are not considered active ocean users in our community, but they are actually responsible for selling the fish at market. And the economics, as we all know, money makes the world go round. The economics is very important. So if you exclude women from those decision-making spaces in ocean governance and fisheries regulations, there'll be ricocheting effects economically. So from ignoring the fact that I'm a woman, and obviously gender equity is something that I care about, from a purely scientific point of view, to make your conservation strategy more effective, you have to involve women in these conversations. So I'm going to roll through another flowchart. Bear with me. For anyone that doesn't like flowcharts, I'm sorry, but I love them. So I'm going with it. So there are no women present in ocean governance and management meetings. Why? So we're going to do the whys again. Women are not considered ocean users. Why is that? Well, no women can swim. And why is that? A few different reasons. So lack of access to menstrual products compatible with swimming, lack of female role models within swimming space and ocean space. And swimming is also seen as a less essential skill for girls. Why linked to all of those? I know we're getting complex quickly, but just bear with me. So lack of access to products, lack of availability locally. So and lack of money to purchase. So no kind of independent source of income for women. So we did 200 surveys that informed this flowchart and our projects, and those showed that most women don't have their own source of income and rely on a partner or family member to give them money to access products to help with menstrual management, but that results in often not getting any access to any menstrual products, especially ones that are compatible with swimming. There's also just a lack of availability of them locally in local shops. And then for the swimming that is seen as less essential for girls, well, traditionally in our area, women look after the farm and they look after the home. So they're responsible for cooking, for looking after the children. Again, going to why, so just going along that length at the bottom. Well, they're generally less qualified than their male counterparts. Well, why is that? Well, they're not finishing school. So why is that? Well, they're having children and getting married young. So why is that? So there's a lack of access, lack of education, lack of access to contraception, those two things. So lack of sex ed means that in our area, having sex out of wedlock isn't taboo, but getting pregnant out of wedlock is. That means that girls are having sex young, and then average age, and I mean average, I'm not talking the lower end, bang average age of marriage is 15 in our area, which is actually child marriage. But that means that as soon as you're pregnant, you drop out of school. So when you're pregnant, you drop out of school, you become living in the house and home, and you don't finish your education most of the time. Some of our team members, women team members, have put themselves into education later on and kind of gone back to it. But generally speaking, you drop out of education. Also, under Portuguese colonial rule, no women were allowed access to education. So all women over the age of 50, more or less, which is when Portuguese colonial rule ended, are illiterate. So if you think about decision-making spaces, generally through your career, you kind of build you like gain different levels of accessibility into decision-making spaces, and that takes time. And so generally it's older people that gain that kind of access. And so there's no women in those spaces because they're illiterate and can't communicate in Portuguese as well. They can only communicate in the local dialect. So again, doing that root cause analysis. Lack of availability of menstrual products, lack of money to purchase it, lack of education, lack of access to contraception. So roll on our See Her project. So our See Her project, lovely little pun on words that we love a cute title. But essentially this is addressing this gender inequity in marine science and in ocean governance in general. So we have a few different projects linked to it. So we have an upskilling project, which is all about introducing women into ocean spaces. So the role models are also tackled this way. It also opens career paths, alternative sources of income. And we also launched this last year. We received a small grant to launch our sexual health and reproductive rights project, which is about access to contraception. So we distribute tampons and menstrual products within that project, along with education around contraception, what is it, how to use it, all of that kind of stuff. And this is actually a bolt onto our swimming lessons, because our survey showed that most women would not be able to come to just pure sexual health and reproductive rights classes, because their spouse or father or whatever might not want them to attend. So we have the sexual health and reproductive rights part bolted onto the back of women's swimming lessons. So a girl can just say, I'm going to swimming lessons, and she just happens to be there at the 20 minutes at the end when these kind of items are distributed and there's education around this. So lack of access, we're tackling that way. Lack of education. So we had our most recent cohort of our ocean school recent cohort of people who participated in our ocean school Well, actually, all women from our gender equity project focus group, which is that bottom photo, along with Pascal, our community outreach manager, who's a dude right in the middle there. And then our aquaculture project, which is on the left, that's Yudmila, our marine biologist, deploying a aquaculture growth trial, which in itself has had trials and tribulations with cyclones wrecking the growth trials and things like that. But essentially what we're doing there is seeing how long it takes for these mussels to grow to full size, to be able to understand how long it would take to harvest, because we have a natural spat growth that's excessive in our area. So you can take the spat that would outcompete itself naturally on the rocks, and grow it to full size in the water. Meanwhile, all the women have joined our swimming program and have learned to swim, so they can actually be able to get out to the mussels and be able to harvest them. But we're still in the growth trial and equipment testing phase, but we've completed the environmental scoping phase. So then once you tackle those root causes, you solve your main problem again. The last thing I'll say before I wrap up and we move on to the questions is the last thing that you need to consider as well is the scalability of your projects. So when you develop things like this, it's really important. There's lots of different grassroots NGOs all around the world, and big NGOs. Any NGO of any size, I believe, has a certain responsibility to knowledge share. It's a little bit like Simon said at the beginning, knowledge sharing is so important in this space, and it's important not to reinvent the wheel. And so last year, at the end of last year, right at the end, so this is brand new, we started our Ripple Network, which is a global alliance of small grassroots NGOs who are doing similar work across the world. Essentially, it started because we realized that we're having lots of informal chats about the same kind of issues with different friends across the industry. So we decided to formalize it, and then we can pool our impact stats and apply for grants together and kind of help solve each other's problems. So the Ripple Network was born quite naturally that way. So the scalability element of conservation work is also very important. That is it from me for this talk. So I think we're moving on to questions now, but yeah, thanks for listening.
That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for that, Francesca. I'm sure everybody absolutely loved that. Not only just the science behind it, which you explained beautifully, so many lecturers could learn so much from that approach, particularly like your whole root cause analysis, that really does speak to people. And I think it helps people understand all the different linkages, which is where people sometimes fall down. And it's difficult to convey it so accurately. And you did an amazing job, which obviously is why you've been so successful with this work. So what we're going to do now is we have got time for what is always known in these events as a fireside chat. Now, we're not actually by the fireside. We're in different parts, and very different parts of the country. We're in different buildings. I would much prefer a nice little fireside chat. I was thinking a big leatherback chair sort of thing, roaring fire, and just having a nice relaxed little discussion of things. But we're going to try to replicate that. So we're going to have a few questions that I've got jotted down, and then we're going to go to the audience questions in around about 15 minutes or so. So we would like to invite you to add any questions that you've got, and if you've got any that you can see that are on the question list already, if you want to vote those up by giving them a thumbs up, then we'll see the prioritization from you as our guests as to what you'd like to ask. Okay, so hopefully that is all nice and clear for everybody. So what I'd like to do now is, if we can just start off, Francesca, can we take you back to your first times and your first point of your work at Southampton? Can you tell us all about that? What did you study, and what societies did you join? What was it that inspired you so much? Because you clearly took a really big, brave leap. Something must have inspired you.
Yeah, so I studied marine biology. So I actually came into Southampton on marine biology with oceanography. Yeah, and then I switched over to straight marine bio integrated masters. I was actually the inspiration behind that switch was not that inventive. I was the year that they tripled the fees, so it was wow. It made mathematical sense to just do the masters as attached to the bachelor's, because I could keep the £3,000 fees before they changed it to £9,000 if I just did it all in one chunk, which I'm actually in hindsight very glad I did, because then I got sucked into LTO and it took me a while to go back to academia. So yeah, so I switched over, I think it was at the end of my first year, and then I decided I wanted to make myself as employable as possible in the summers of my university breaks. So the first summer I did my dive master, my PADI dive master, to be, originally before LTO, I was like, oh, I'm just going to travel the world and dive and like do science. So yeah, and then I decided that I wanted to do an internship. I actually attended, it was a career event at NOC, and there was a guy there talking about white sharks in South Africa, and I chatted to him, and the internship didn't have any availability, but there was one in Mozambique, and so I went on that, and then ended up in Ginjata, which is where I now live and work when I'm in Mozambique. And I saw my first kind of sharks being killed, and sharks were I call them my gateway animal into marine biology. So they were like what I was obsessed with when I was a kid. I really loved sharks. When all the other girls were like drawing boys' names, I was drawing sharks on my little diary. Very weird kid. My email address when I was 13 was sharksarthecoolestdudes at hotmail.com. So it was a sign from a young age. So yeah, so then I just got into that was the end of my second year. I went to Mozambique, and so then from there it was fairly straightforward in terms of I saw sharks being killed, wanted to understand more about it, science brain, and where I was in my degree as well, I wanted to collect more data on it and understand the issues, so then I could do that, because it was an integrated master's. I could do that between my third and fourth year, so could and did go back. I had Ken Collins as my supervisor, and he was great and helped design the project and gave me the flexibility that I needed, really, especially when you're just like, I'm going to go and do this thing with zero backup plan. But I just had a lot of conviction, and I think he could see that, bless him. Yeah, basically then started LTO off the back of that. So it kind of originated, I wouldn't say there was like a particular, I mean, I was social secretary of NOCSOC, which was great fun. And I loved like being part of the societies when I was there. I think it's a great way to like socialize and learn organization skills on like a small scale, which is great. But I would say that it was kind of the because I went to Mozambique so early on in my degree, I was able to shape things around it. Like I remember in my fourth year or maybe third year, I had the option of doing an environmental law module, maritime law module, and I found that really interesting when previously I wouldn't have, but in my head I was applying it to Ginjata and the MPA plan and things like that. So yeah, sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
That was a brilliant answer. I think what I particularly love about it as well is that I think so many people will resonate with what you've said, and also I think it's an important point for any students who are watching at the moment who are looking to graduate soon, is that sometimes there'll be one tiny little point in time where something doesn't quite work out as you thought it would, and it feels like it's a real loss at that point, and then actually takes you in a different direction, which then controls and gives you that opportunities for the rest of your life, which is what happened with you as to how you ended up in Mozambique. It was on the back of that point where something didn't quite work out in terms of the placement, the internship you wanted, and you ended up going down the other route, which has proved to be so fortuitous at that point in time. So I guess the message there is also about, if you get a little bit of disappointment, it might actually be the best thing that's happened to you, because you've gone on to do such amazing things since.
Thank you.
Love it. Brilliant. So you did quite intimidated amount, frankly, during your degree. I must confess, I never did anything like that when I was doing my degree, and that sense of adventure has really paid dividends. And so when you left university, when you left as your undergraduate integrated master's program, you graduated. let's discuss that now. What path did you take immediately after that, and how did that get you to where you are now?
So I always say that I'm wildly underqualified compared to my staff. So I actually founded the organization while I was still at university. So our founding date was November 2014, which with the Southampton cycle is relatively near the beginning of fourth year. And I say that I always say that I had like a panic period, which has faded, I think, as I've progressed through my career. But I specifically remember giving myself 3 days every time a really big decision needed to be made. Because when you're 21, I mean, to be honest, starting business at any age, but like also being young and still at university was scary. And I remember having to create the website and then it being public and being like, wow, that's a really big deal. And I remember opening the bank account and being like, oh, that's a really big deal. And like registering the organization, oh, that's a really big deal. So that was all in the November. Which actually was great because I then had the whole time writing my thesis, which was on the shark research, the shark fisheries in Mozambique. But I also could complement that with reading up on what other people had done with NGOs and what had worked and hadn't worked around the world, and learning from other people's mistakes to try and avoid making the same ones. So I technically had already started the organization when I was at university, but I remember I basically delayed going out to Mozambique to go to graduation in the July, I think it was, and I stepped on a plane like 2 days later and just didn't look back. So yeah, then for the next when did I start? It was like the next essentially almost 10 years building the organization. I met Pascal, our community outreach manager, within a month of work in Mozambique. Pure luck. A lot of it is pure luck. Pure luck. He was the brother of a friend of mine, and we just got chatting, really got on. He was 22, I was 21. And I think when you're that young, you're really aware that you don't know everything. So there was a very kind of organic growth process with Love the Oceans where Pascal and I would be talking about a potential project or a problem or something, and then an elder or a chief might be like, well, this is the priority, or like, have you thought of this? Or we actually, like, again, a bit of luck, one of the chiefs in the community had been to Kenya and seen a marine conservation initiative there. So when we floated the idea of Love the Oceans and talked about like a vague plan, I mean, I was 21, so it wasn't a huge plan, but that chief just immediately turned around and went, yep, I know what you're talking about. I've seen something similar in Kenya, which was incredibly useful to just kind of have someone go like, yeah, I get it, kind of thing, straight away. And then Pascal's been a massive part of building the organization. I mean, Mozambique's not English speaking, so I had to learn pretty basic Portuguese as quick as I could, but Pascal both language translated but also culture translated, because things that could be seen as, you know, I don't know, confrontational in England, not confrontational in England, could be seen as confrontational in Mozambique. So translating what you're saying into a way to get the outcome that you want from the conversation, he's always been incredibly good at that. And will just tell me to shut up if I get too frustrated with the situation. He'll just handle it. So yeah, in terms of the path, like I gained qualifications after uni, and while I was at Southampton, I did my like boat, I think, and I would urge students to take advantage of this because I probably didn't do as much as I wish I had done while I was at university, but you get opportunities. Different lecturers obviously have different interests, and you get opportunities to do different qualifications. So I did do my first aid, I did my RIB certificate, and I did my boat safety certificate, all of which have come in handy. There was like a tagging opportunity I wish I'd taken advantage of, because now we do some tag work on the side sometimes, and it would have been nice to have that. Yeah, so I think for me it was very learn on the job, and I didn't really have a career path per se, and it was only when the pandemic hit, things kind of slowed down internationally for everybody, that I had a minute to kind of regroup and go, where am I at? And then that's when I decided to take on a PhD, and I wanted to get some of the data that we had published, and build kind of the academic side back out, which is why I've taken that on, and because I love being busy and apparently don't like sleep.
Clearly, yeah, without a doubt. I this obviously speaks to why you were awarded the Rising Star category. You won the Rising Star Award in our Outstanding Alumni Awards very recently, and that was only back in July. And we were incredibly grateful that you came back and accepted that at graduation, which was fantastic, because not only did it give you the opportunity to come back and give something back and all that experience, but it showed our students what you can achieve whilst you're studying on that type of course at the university. So it's a real immediate impact point for our students as they're graduating, because of how much you've achieved, and they were able to listen to what you have done there. So we can only thank you for that. Did you enjoy that experience at all, or did you find it a little bit strange?
Yeah, I loved it. It was great. I've been back to Knock a few times for talks and stuff, but I haven't really been to Highfield much since I graduated. So it was quite nice to do a full circle kind of moment. And it was kind of mad because it was pretty much 10 years to the day that
Really?
I
Wow.
had sat in the exact same room and like done the exact same ceremony. So it was like this really lovely, just like full circle moment. Coming back and seeing everyone, and I mean also seeing how much the uni's like come on and changed and developed and all of that kind of stuff. It was really cool to be back. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, as I say, we can only thank you for that. Would you be okay if we moved to the questions from the audience now? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, 100%.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right. So we've got lots of questions, as you'd expect, because we've got a lot of guests. So that's exactly what we'd hope for. So we're going on the popularity ranking here. And the first question, I would just like to thank and welcome Callum Upton for posting this question. Welcome to the session, and we're very, very pleased you joined us. And your question is incredibly important. Callum's asking, many social enterprises struggle with financial sustainability. How have you overcome this? You've mentioned grants a couple of times. What other means of income does Love the Oceans generate?
I could rant on this subject for ages, and I literally did a conference on Saturday and I spoke on this topic exactly, so long that the guy stood in front and waved at me and was like, that's enough. So I'll try and keep my answer as concise as I can. Financial sustainability in this space is really challenging, and it shouldn't be underestimated. I definitely underestimated it, and I think coming from a science background with no business experience was really challenging. Andrea, our non-exec director, she actually volunteered for us way back in the first year, and she came on board just after that, and voluntarily part-time, and her experience was business. So she brought in contracts, insurance, all the really important stuff that I had zero idea about. But she also helped build out more of an idea of what the financial strategy should look like, how to run accounts, all of that kind of stuff. I'm also really lucky, and I don't think I realized growing up how unusual it is that both my parents are entrepreneurs. So building your own thing was like very normal in my family. And I grew up in a family that was like you work hard, you go far type of vibe. So it was not really questioned. It was just like, oh, right, yeah, like obviously you're going to start your own thing. And also that meant that my dad was there as a resource to immediately turn to and go, how do you actually register a company? Like where do you go? Like what is Companies House? And all of that kind of stuff. In terms of the finances, it's ever evolving, and it's one of our ambitions this year to get more financially stable. So pre-pandemic, we actually have two registrations. We have Love the Oceans and Love the Oceans Conservation. And pre-pandemic, we ran a lot of expeditions. We still do run some, but we ran a lot of expeditions and different kind of like trips. The idea was that we could run them through Love the Oceans, and then grant the money to Love the Oceans Conservation, which is the charity, and implements all the work. As unrestricted funding, which unrestricted funding means you can spend the money on whatever project you need to at that point. It's every charity's dream, but it's also like almost impossible to get, because usually people want to ring fence your funding, so you can only spend that money on that one project, which could mean that we have loads of money for the swimming project and we can run that for a year, no worries whatsoever, but then I struggle to pay staff salaries. And it looks weird for people that don't know how charities work, because people are like, well, if you've got loads of money, then why aren't you paying that other thing? But it's ring fence funding, so you can't. So that was the idea. Then the pandemic hit, and the whole world pivoted, and we had to pivot real hard, real quick, as per everyone did, and we started doing more grants. Last year, 80% of our income came from grants, and I will say that that's something that I really want to change, and our whole team wants to change. The grant sector is becoming more and more competitive, and it's becoming more and more ridiculous. Every grant is annual, so you only get funding for a year, so that's great that you got funding for a year, but then you need to find more funding, and the cycles are so far in advance that often, cool, you've got funding, but now you need to start applying for grants for the next year. So you're constantly fighting for money. Every grant wants an innovative project, so it wants to be the first it's ever been done. It also wants it's a finite grant cycle, so it wants a brand new project and it wants it shiny. And with holistic conservation, one of the issues that you have is that it's complex, as you saw from the flow diagrams. You can't explain what we do totally in a 15-second Instagram reel. And the consumer society that we live in means that most funders want something that is very 1 + 1 = 2. And when you get into the social nuances of it, that's just not the case in real world conservation. And when you're looking at real world conservation, if you're doing community conservation, you're wanting to build long-term community trust. Long-term community trust means following through on projects and delivering. Science, you want long-term data sets. That means you can't reinvent your project every year to get new funding. So the grant sector is becoming more and more ridiculous. The competition is now like, how much impact can you make with so little money? We put a ridiculous pressure on charities to create more and more impact on less and less money. There's actually a great TED talk on our attitude towards the charity sector, because if you look at the way society views charity and how we say everyone lost their marbles a few years ago about different CEOs of different big charities. But if you look at how much that exact person would earn if they went into the private sector, they would earn quadruple the amount. And they decided to take that pay cut to work and do something better. But we have no problem paying top lawyers and oil and gas loads of money. But we have an issue paying people to do good things. So that whole thing is wild. And it means that the grant sector is quite messed up, in my opinion, and the structuring behind short-term, i.e. 1 year grant cycles, makes financial stability really difficult. For us, we still run expeditions and ideally want to build them back out in order to generate revenue and put that back into Love the Oceans, and be able to run the projects with that unrestricted funding, which is the dream. The other thing we're looking to do, and I'd recommend if you're going to start your own thing, do this sooner rather than later, is look at securing corporate sponsors. So we call it our partnerships for purpose, but essentially you find businesses and you find individuals, philanthropists, who want to commit money to a cause. That's a lot better, especially if you're a people person. I'm a people person. I am pretty good at maintaining relationships, hopefully come across quite authentic, and I can tell people kind of how it is. And that generally does well with person-to-person relationships, rather than a grant cycle where you never meet the person, you never see their face, you don't have an ongoing relationship, you're just kind of, you finish your grant, you're done, you're out. So I would recommend building out more private sector relationships, whether that's investors, if you're going to build a business, or whether that's donors, sponsors, commercial partners. look at having a fundraising strategy and a like financing strategy from the private sector. But if you don't have that skill set, don't panic, because you can also build an advisory board, which are all people who are fairly senior in their careers, have a ton of experience, and are willing to volunteer their time. And those people, you can get advisory board members with skill sets that you don't have. And that is like, it took me a while for us to put together an advisory board. I regret not doing it earlier, because it can be an incredible resource, and they can often connect you with different people. So I would definitely recommend doing that as well.
Blimey, absolutely stacks of advice there. That's fantastic. Thank you. So I'm sure there's, because the thing is, a lot of the questions that are in here at the moment are on similar types of themes around that area. So you've covered quite a lot of the questions within that answer in terms of what people are looking to get out of this. We've got 10 minutes left. We have got, guess how many questions? How many do you think we got?
I don't know.
We've got 37 questions to get through.
Oh, wow.
So
somehow I'm not sure we'll do that in 10 minutes.
No, I think we'll just rattle through this as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
Okay, so the number one at the moment, which has been bumped up the rankings, is what advice would you give to undergraduates for gaining work experience or internships to enhance their CVs? I know there'll be a lot of people on the call who will be interested in this.
Yeah, I'll try and give a quick one on this, but basically, more experience the better. It doesn't matter if it's directly in your field, but just get as much experience as possible. Don't wait, do it early on. Make contact with if there's an organization that you really aspire to work with, make contact with them now. You can volunteer hours, you can do an hour a week, you can literally just do a tiny amount. Especially if you're holding down another job while doing a degree, you can do remote volunteering with them, just so that your foot is in the door, your name is in their head, so that when you do graduate and you apply for a job with them, it's a more informal application. I would also say every experience is valid, even if you hate it. So if you hate it, you've just managed to eliminate a field that you didn't want to work in. So we have students come out to us and they think that they're obsessed with whales, and they actually turn out they're obsessed with nudibranchs. That is equally valid, because as coming out and being like, yes, I love whales, because you've still eliminated something that you thought you had a deep interest in and actually was just surface level. So the more experience, the better, because you'll develop a process of elimination, essentially. To get that experience, email. Often, if you can have a warm introduction, great. You're at a university that is internationally renowned for marine science and environmental science. Some guy in the airport the other day asked me where I studied marine biology and guessed University of Southampton when I said I was from the UK. So international reputation. You've got academics like Simon that have an extreme number of connections and an extreme number of experience in the industry. There is a very good chance that someone at the university is connected with the organization that you want to intern with. Utilize that connection. Also, if you don't have money to go abroad or go off campus or anything like that, and you just want to find someone where you are, look within the university. Every professor has an area of research that they love. It's their research baby, and they're often overwhelmed with work because they've got to teach as well. So they often bite your hand off for an assistant. So reach out to them, offer to volunteer some hours. It can be great to build a relationship with that professor. You walk away with a professional reference for when you go for a job, but also it means that they may have PhD students that are doing research subjects you're interested. You can get lab experience. You can get all of that kind of experience, start to build out your CV without even leaving campus or even leaving your sofa if you do the whole thing remotely. So look at the opportunities available that are on your doorstep, because you might not even know they're there.
Priceless advice, thank you. And again, I know that that's going to go down incredibly well in the chat. We've got lots of questions from that area. The question I read out was anonymous, so I can't say thank you to them, but we've had similar through here. So Ella, hi Ella, I've asked very much similar one there about advice to yourself, and that then transfers to what other people would ask. Okay, how are we doing time? Right, let's rattle through these. The next one is, I'm going to go to this one because I like the fact that somebody is really super interested from a young age. So this is Leona's question. Do you work a lot with different animals, and what is your favorite part of the job? I'm in year 12 and I'm super interested in marine biology and zoology, but I want to focus on animals.
Yes, I work with loads of different animals. Unfortunately, in fisheries, there's a lot of dead ones, which I probably didn't think I was going to be doing at your age. But I probably one of my favorite things is the whales that we have. We're in a whale breeding ground, humpback whale breeding ground. So we get hundreds of individuals. It's so noisy underwater, your rib cage vibrates with the song while you're diving. And I get to go, I kind of did this on purpose to force myself away from my laptop. I'm the only qualified stand-up paddleboard instructor in our staff body, which means when people go paddleboarding, I have to be with them, which, as you can imagine, with humpback whales is quite an experience. So I would say that that's probably, yeah, one of my most, it makes my heart warm every time you're sat on a paddleboard and a whale comes up to you. I mean, there's few things in life and very few places in the world you could do that. So I would say that. And then also our baited remote underwater video research. This is very nerdy of me, but sharks were what got me into marine biology, and they're still very close to my heart. Watching our baited remote underwater video research, I specifically remember the first tiger shark we got on the bruvs. And it was midnight. All my staff were asleep. No one was awake, so I saw it and I was like, oh my God, and like got up and walked around the house and no one was awake. And I texted my mum and texted her a screenshot and went, Mum, look, it's a tiger shark. Mum knows nothing about marine science, doesn't care about marine science, went, lovely, dear. And I was like, no, like this is a really big deal. Yeah, I would say sharks are still like my heart. Species of shark changes every day depending on what I feel like that day. But whales, practically day to day, I love our humpback whales.
Amazing, thank you. I think everybody in the call will have these visions in their head about what it's like to actually paddleboard with a humpback whale, because I mean, imagine terrifying, but also just so exciting and just so overwhelming. Right, yeah. Okay, we've got 4 minutes. Unless I see anything in the chat which tells me otherwise, I think we get cut off at 7 o'clock. So I'm going to have to wrap up at 6:59 and 30 seconds. So next one, unless somebody tells me different on this chat, I've got in front of me here. So this is from, oh, I can go for a couple of minutes if that's okay with you, Francesca?
Yeah,
sure, it's all right. Amazing, yeah. Thank you, because we've got so many great questions here and people have been very generous in joining us. Have you seen, this is from Nina Harvey, have you seen a change of attitude towards sustainable fishing in the local fishers since you started your outreach work?
Yeah, so actually a really interesting one. I was literally just writing this as part of a report earlier today. So there's always a couple of, I call them dinosaurs. They're like the sticks in the mud when you're trying to push through a new project or, you know, make changes. That humans are creatures of habit and people don't like to change their habits. Recently, earlier this year, it was really interesting. There's this guy, Joao, in our community who has been a really difficult fisherman to deal with giving up nets. And he's been a bit of a stick in the mud with our sustainable fishing project. But a bunch of fishermen from outside our area rocked up with monofilament nets. And they wanted to net the area. They're not from our area. And our community turned around and taught our sustainable fishing lecture. Joao did this. He spearheaded it, which was wild that Joao was doing it. But he delivered our sustainable fishing lecture to these foreign fishermen without, like, Pascal was there, I was not there. And Pascal was just sat there like shook that this guy was delivering this lecture on sustainability, and you can't net here because the nets collect the juveniles and the herbivores, and we really have a problem with food security. You're going to make it worse. And successfully kicked the fishermen out of the area who were not from the area. So yes, definitely seen a positive attitude. It was really nice to have it so clearly demonstrated rather than being subtle as previously. So yeah.
Brilliant. That's great. That's great to hear. So we know that you very recently have had a paper published on marine protected effectiveness. Would you be able to very, very briefly, since we're short on time, we want to get other questions, tell us a little bit about this, but particularly where people can access that paper, because I know you've made it open access and I think people would love to be able to read that.
Yeah, so it's on marine protected area effectiveness. It's designed so anyone can pick it up. So anyone being like, a student, a community member, a government member, whoever. It's about coastal marine protected areas, and it's basically a resource informed by 15 years of scientific literature, but pooling together tools developed by NGOs around the world and breaking down marine protected area creation into 4 stages in a flowchart style, because I love flowcharts. And basically, it offers almost a binary way of designing a marine protected area, but with the tools and resources to be able to actually do it. It was born of a frustration from me going to conferences where people would say sweeping statements like, oh, we just need to make marine protected areas more effective. But I'd be sat in the audience like, okay, but where's the Excel spreadsheet to do that? Like, where is that tool? Tell me where to do it, where to get it. So compiled it all and created this paper, which has recently been published. It's open access. It's a Journal of Environmental Management that you can read it in. And I believe the follow-up email after this will have a link to that in there as well, so you can access it there.
Amazing, thank you. So everybody, you've got the link, or you will have the link. Right, so I'm gonna indulge one more. I've been given the nod that we can do one final question. Appreciate some people will probably be feeling you have to leave, got other appointments. So if you are leaving now, thank you. But otherwise we're going to press on, and I think we'll close with this question from Nina De Roca, which is, you mentioned that one of your goals is setting up an MPA in the medium term. What do you envision for this area in terms of access and restrictions? Will there be no-take zones, for example?
Yeah, so we have mapped out the fishing effort in the area, and there will be some no-take zones, but it will be a compilation of different zonage. So it won't be like one big NTZ. You can't do that in our area. People need to be able to fish. There'll be limitations on the types of fishing. So the sustainable fishing project I mentioned, we're trying to transition fishermen away from monofilament net fishing. That's also because we want that banned in the area. So we want no netting in the MPA. We also want some restrictions around tourism. So Mozambique has the potential to become the next Maldives in terms of irresponsible tourism. And we don't want that happening. It's important when tourism is developed that it is developed with responsible guidelines in mind and the right legislation around protecting the animals and the habitats. So there'll also be some regulations in place that inform like how close you can go to a whale with a boat and things like that to make sure that animals aren't hurt. So there'll be various different legislations across different stakeholders. And then the zoning will be a couple of no-take zones, which will be further out. There'll be low-use zones anyway. And then there'll be some restricted gear zones with specific types of fishing, and then some bans on some types of fishing as well, like net fishing. And there'll also be strict minimum landing sizes and catch limits implemented too.
Fantastic, thank you. How would you feel about that? We've got so many questions left. We're going to have to close now. This is a bit of a shameless plug, really, but we're going to be recording a podcast episode soon anyway. How do you feel about we address all the questions that people have got here? Because people have spent their time with us this evening, and there's lots of questions people would want to get addressed. We'll cover the majority of these questions that haven't overlapped on the podcast, on the Meriora podcast, so we can go into more depth from there. So we'll continue the conversation that way. Because people, thank you, Francesca, thank you. So people, thank you for joining us. This is all we have time for this evening. Francesca, enormous thanks from us for doing this, for being so generous this time, not just this evening, but in terms of all your preparation, all the planning meetings we've had as well. It's been an absolute joy, and I mean, we're really lucky, so thank you ever so much.
Thanks for having me.
Very welcome. It's been great to hear from you. I know everybody have enjoyed it. I've learned a lot, and will continue to learn a lot from you, and we very much value everything you're doing for marine conservation. We need people like you, so thank you. I'd like to thank everybody on the call for joining us tonight and for your interest and support for the University of Southampton. And for those of us who are joining on the online stream, in a moment you'll see a short poll. That'll pop up on your screen, and if you could take a couple of minutes to complete that, then we'd be enormously grateful. and you keep an eye on your inbox, because as Francesca said, we will be sending you a link to Francesca's paper and also to the recording of this if there's anything you missed, because say you had to go down to the door for a delivery, or the dog was getting in the way, or the cat jumped in front of the screen. So keep an eye out for that, and you'll also find details about anything about joining the mailing list, so you can keep in touch with us. So thank you again for joining us, and I will leave the final thank you and good evening to Francesca.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was amazing talking to you all, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you, Simon, on the podcast. And thanks to University of Southampton for having me.